Today, we're discussing a comic book for the blind?
Starting lesson in 3, 2, 1. Okay, here's the deal.
Let's learn!
In the year 20XX, a pandemic spread across the land. But when educational doors closed and communities practice social distancing, CFI-70's language and literature teacher was still up for the challenge. Join Mr. Strother and his amazing Quaranteam!
Read alouds, news articles, comic books, writing activities, greyhounds, kids who don't even go here, flavored water, dad jokes.
You are now joining Mr. Strother's Quaranteam.
Welcome back, ballers and scholars. It's week 7, day 1, and that means read aloud. Only 2 weeks to go. Can you believe it? This week's theme is heroes. What does that word mean to you? Now, when literally defined, a hero is a person who's admired or idealized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. Do you have any heroes in your life? Maybe a parent, maybe a friend, maybe someone fictional. I mean, I learned a lot of my life lessons from Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Dead serious. Before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to the real heroes like first responders, dispatchers, and essential workers, parents, guardians, and loved ones who are doing their best to juggle both career and full-time parenthood, or just one or the other. It's the Wild West lately in a lot of ways, so props to you all. I mean, I know I'm juggling a career and a teenager at home. Woof. And a huge shout out to the PTSA for providing me with this awesome shirt that I can't show you technically, but I love it. 2 huge thumbs up and mask. To all of you students hanging in there, I see you. In many ways, you're my heroes. I'm sure some of you have it easy breezy, but even a supported, loving home comes with its own struggles. And I know that some of you are hanging tough. I see you too. When I was younger, I had a really rough go. Sometimes my folks struggled to make ends meet, and especially when there was one or no parents in the house, it seemed like they were always off to work or on call or had just one more thing to do. Sometimes I had to take care of siblings. Sometimes I had to whip up something to eat with not much. And if you can relate to that, I see you too. Hang in there. Reach out if you need any resources. You'd be surprised with what and who I can put you in touch with. You're not alone. If you feel angry, hopeless, or trapped, that's a lot of us in middle school. I mean, ugh, what an awkward time, even without pandemics. One day you're like, hey fellas, and then you're like, what's up? Okay, let's back up. Comic books. So maybe you're new to the planet and our classroom. What is a comic book? A comic book is a magazine that presents a serialized story in the form of a comic strip, typically featuring the adventures of a superhero. Serialized means it's chapter by chapter, or issue by issue. Side note, can I tell you about a pet peeve of mine? A collection of serialized comics put together often gets called graphic novels, but the truth is they're not. A collection of serialized comic books is actually a TPB, or a trade paperback. A graphic novel is a novel in comic strip format, so basically a longer and complete story. Comics that get collected together are a trade. A one and done story is a graphic novel. Got it? Good. Now you can hang with comic nerds without embarrassing yourself. Whew. You already know I'm a huge comic book nerd, so rather than read one book to you today, I'm going to let the author do it for me. How do you do that with a comic book, you ask? Well, you see, today's inventive comic book is in audio form. I know, right? But is it still a comic book? According to The Hollywood Reporter, James McAvoy, aka Young Professor X, is stepping into a dream role. The actor will voice star as Dream in Audible's adaptation of The Sandman, which is a classic DC Vertigo comic book written by Neil Gaiman. The Sandman is a popular dark comic that blends mythology and history into a DC comic horror setting. Side note, Gaiman wrote some of my favorite fantastical fiction, like The Graveyard Book, Stardust, and even Coraline. And as far as I know, this is the first mainstream example of a graphic novel being adapted into audio, and they're considering it a comic book. But before DC jumped on board, it actually all started earlier this school year, back in September 2019. And this comic book is unlike any other. According to UnseenComic.com, Unseen is an audio comic created by Chad Allen, written by a blind person with a blind heroine for blind and sighted audiences. Unseen is the story of Afsana, a blind assassin living in a chaotic world in which she is invisible to society. Discounting her abilities is her enemy's gravest mistake. Although I really want you to spend your lang and lit time each day reading and writing, for today, you can simply listen and reflect. It's not often that comics transcend their medium, so I thought this was a cool experience. To be fair, I'm also a little biased. We're all a little different in our own unique ways, and my 3-year-old has a lot of medical issues, and one of his diagnoses is cortical vision impairment. That means his eyes work fine, but his brain struggles to send proper signals to his eyes for seeing things. Sometimes his eyes are on. Sometimes his eyes are off. Sometimes everything is blurry. Sometimes it helps him to use his periphery on the outside. His vision's not broken, it's just different, you know? But a lot of people just see him for his disabilities, and I have to spend a lot of time advocating for him. So it resonated with me when the author said, I wrote Unseen to help me make sense of the challenging times in which we live. Often my worldview is ignored, and as a blind person, it feels as if that marginalization is amplified further by the challenges we face to be heard. So that's it. Your job is to listen to Unseen, Chapter 1. I'm going to say it again. Listen to Unseen, Chapter 1. The link is in the description below, and it's also linked on Clever. When you listen to today's read aloud, spoiler alert, it makes your writing activity on Thursday all that much easier. Think about the author and how he chooses specific details. In an article by The Guardian, the author of Unseen states that comic books are a visual medium, a marriage of text and graphic art. The root of every comic is highly visual, but we don't see those pictures with our eyes. We see them with our brain, he says. It's the whole story that matters. It's how we describe to our brains what that story is. So if you check out Unseen and you really dig it and you want to know more, there's a Newsela article called Creating a Comic Book for People Who Are Blind. But the truth is, it's for everyone. And he talks about that on the website. There are articles linked to the LA Times, The Guardian, and The Hollywood Reporter. If you really dig this audio comic, there's also another podcast out right now from Marvel and Stitcher called Wolverine: The Lost Trail. Last month, Marvel launched a second new podcast called Marvels, based on one of my favorite comic book artists, Alex Ross. So again, listen to Unseen, Chapter 1. And as always, have a great day.